Good afternoon and good evening for Sir in Australia. Welcome to a session of Diplomatically Speaking, an initiative of the Foreign Policy Research Center, New Delhi. I am Shashwat Shukla. I am an intern at FPRC. I am currently pursuing my master's in development studies from the Tata Institute of Social Sciences and with a student exchange at University of Sydney. Uh, it is our honor to welcome our esteemed guest, Dr. Raghbendra Jha. A brief introduction about Sir. Professor Raghbendra Jha is a Professor Emeritus of Economics at the Ant Cordon Department of Economics at the Crawford School of Public Policy, Australian National University, Canberra. He is a fellow of the World Innovation Foundation and specializes in development economics, macroeconomics, and public economics. Professor Jha is on the editorial boards of major economics journals and is consulted widely by esteemed organizations like World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the UNECA, UNRISD, DFID, and IFAD. He has published extensively with leading publishers in key areas of economics throughout his career. He has 18 books to his credit and has edited 11 books, besides contributing to many referred journal articles. Recent book publications of his include Hunger and Malnutrition as Major Challenges to the 21st Century, Facets of India's Economy and Her Society. This was published in 2 volumes. His current research interests are in macroeconomics problems, especially in the problems of developing countries, Indian economic problems, in particular with reference to poverty, undernutrition, malnutrition, functioning of agricultural markets, and financial sector reforms. I would now welcome our director, Professor Mahendra Gorsar, to carry this session forward with the agenda for today. Professor Gorsar, take it away.
Thank you, Shashwat. I welcome Dr. Jha, our distinguished guest for today's show. Hello, Dr. Jha.
Hello to both of you. It's very nice to see you both and talk to you. And thank you for me to this meeting.
Yeah. So, Dr. Jha, before we start this dialogue, just I would like to share something with you that Diplomatically Speaking is a FPRC initiative to share the views of policymakers, diplomats, academics, and media persons on various issues of foreign policy, international relations, especially related to India. And it is our privilege to talk to you and have the benefit of your matured views on various issues relating to economic aspects of foreign policy. I think in which you specialize, you have an expertise, and you are known throughout the world for your work that you have done so far. So, with your permission, I would like to start this conversation further. There are few issues that need attention today. As you know, the whole world is in the grip of pandemic for the last 2 years. And nothing comes to our mind than how to overcome this. And it has impacted all walks of life in all countries of the world. And something which worries the whole world is about the economy. The economic growth has gone down in all countries, and every country is trying to overcome this problem. So, my first question to you in this context will be, what lessons does the pandemic have for the design of foreign economic policy, which has come to the forefront in today's context?
Thank you very much for the warm welcome. And it's my privilege to be with you both today. The issue that you have raised is absolutely fundamental, and it is something about which we really should be thinking very hard. Some people are working on it, but right now the parameters are not very clear. Now, let me tell you why the pandemic has very serious implications for for economic relations and therefore for international diplomacy. Now, if you go back to the pandemic when it started in February March last year, uh, February March 2020, we saw that the WHO, the World Health Organization, was very slow to declare it a pandemic. In fact, a critical milestone was that they allowed flights out of China the Chinese New Year of 2020 from and when the pandemic was already raging in China, and that led to the spread of it's widely accepted now that that led to the spread of the pandemic in parts of Europe where Chinese tourists had gone after the Chinese during the Chinese New Year holiday of 2020. Now, but when the pandemic took hold and the whole world started really understanding, the whole world was taken by surprise. They didn't know what it was. They didn't know how to react to it. But then, when the ferocity of the pandemic was there for everyone to see, the response was one of panic. And I'll tell you why the response was one of panic. For example, if you look at this simple thing called personal protective equipment, which we call PPEs in various parts of the world, the personal protective equipments, the main ingredients for the production of PPEs used to come from China for all countries, for almost all countries, but and also for India. India didn't have any PPE production unit at the time of the beginning of the pandemic. So we were caught by surprise. So were many countries, and this accounts for the very large deaths that you saw in Italy and the United Kingdom during the first phase of the pandemic, in the early part of the pandemic last year. In India, what it meant was that since we didn't have any PPEs and China had stopped sending PPEs to other countries because it was busy dealing with the pandemic in its own country, that there was a real crisis in India about how to deal with the pandemic. And that is one of the reasons why our first lockdown in 2020, the lockdown, was one of the longest in the world. And I don't need to tell you how difficult it was for India, for Indians, many of whom lost their jobs, many of whom had to leave their workplaces in large cities like Mumbai and Delhi, and there were lots of horrific tales of how this tragedy unfolded and how these people went back home and so on. So what happened essentially was the message from this was that the over reliance on China for production, so the world has willy-nilly allowed over the past 15 to 20 years or so, has allowed China to become the manufacturing hub of the entire world. China is everybody's largest trading partner, every significant country's largest trading partner, and in particular, it is a huge manufacturing hub. So people have realized that surety of supply, certainty of supply, stability of supply, assuredness of supply is as important as the notional thought that yes, the supply will be forthcoming if we want it. So the standard model of international trade assumes that supply is forthcoming from your partner country, but it does not model the uncertainty and risk with which the supply comes. So the countries of the world are now very aggressively dealing with building coalitions of countries wherein the supply of goods and services, particularly manufacturing goods, can be assured. And this is one of the reasons, one of the principal reasons why India has opted for a has opted for a some kind of huge domestic Atmanirbhar Bharat, the domestic manufacturing initiative. Which so this is one of the reasons. The happenings during the early part of the pandemic have induced the policy shift towards Atmanirbhar Bharat and various other things. So this has happened in many countries, even in a country like Australia, which is so heavily dependent on international trade. Its trade to GDP ratio is much larger than India's. But even here, there are moves to start making things on their own and to make coalitions with countries from which surety of supply can be maintained even during difficult periods. So this is the first major lesson that the pandemic has for the world economy and for diplomats and policymakers all over the world. The first major lesson is that look, global institutions are fine, but at the time of the pandemic, neither the WHO nor the WTO came to your assistance when the chips were down, and you had to rely on your own. So now, however, there is clearly there are economies of scale in large-scale production, and there is something called comparative advantage in international trade. So you must build strong economic relationships and therefore diplomatic relationships with countries from which you can be sure that supply will be forthcoming at a time of need. That is very important. Therefore, there are these small groups of countries which are trying to come together to assure supply. There is this big initiative that Australia and India and a few other countries have, where they are trying to assure supply no matter what. And the trust in economic activity, trust in international economic activity has become a fundamental determinant of diplomatic relations. It has become a fundamental determinant. If you cannot trust your trading partner, then you cannot trust your diplomatic partner. Okay, you can't divorce the trust in diplomacy with the trust in economic relations. These two things come together, and everybody now realizes it. That's why there is this big grouping of countries like India and Australia and Japan and some other countries which are trying to build bridges across each other so that in case there is a problem, any kind of problem, they will be there for each other to support. It is too much to expect for each country to become Atmanirbhar. That is not possible. Even India in its Atmanirbhar program is focused on a very high export possibility. It wants to export a lot. So they do want to remain connected with the world economy, but they want to ensure that their supply chains are well protected. So this is one of the major lessons from the pandemic. The second thing is that we should understand is that the relationship is particularly vital in areas where during a pandemic lives are at stake. So we had India is doing very well in pharmaceutical production. As you know, India is the world's third largest exporter of pharmaceutical products, and it produces more than 60-70% of the vaccines that the world produces. However, India faces again in the supply chain. Has faced difficulties in the supply chain. You might remember that when India was trying to begin its policy of rapid expansion of rapid expansion of vaccine production, there was a problem in obtaining raw materials for vaccine production. In fact, there was a problem with China to begin with, and then the problem shifted even to the United States. The United States was not supplying enough raw material for vaccine production in India. But the United States came on board soon, emphasizing once again the importance of cementing certainty in trade relations as a basis for friendship, as a basis for diplomatic depth between countries. So I'll submit those two propositions to you.
Sir, you very well explained the problem the countries faced, and they try to overcome that. And now we come to India. What's your assessment of the impact of pandemic on India's economic growth? It has, economic growth has gone down. Production has almost stopped in certain sectors. Jobs were lost, and there is almost a chaos, in the economic field. So, how do you assess this situation, and what should be done to overcome this situation in India?
Yeah, thank you. Let me try to address this. See, India faces particularly severe conditions, and let me try to elaborate on that. The one reason why the conditions are so serious in India is that India has such a large informal sector. Okay, you have a large number of people, very large number of people, upwards of about 80% or so, who are employed in the informal sector. For informal sector employment is about 80%. And the largest employer in the formal sector is the MSME sector, micro and small and medium enterprises sector. That's the largest employer in the formal sector. So when the pandemic hit and there was this long lockdown, the informal sector basically collapsed in the cities and small towns and so on. However, there were two packages that were given. One was the package one was the increase in the funds for the National Rural Employment Guarantee Program that occurred right in the beginning, and at the same time, the increase in funds given to states to employ people who were reverse migrating from cities and towns back to the villages, because they had lost their jobs in the cities and towns. And so these two things held up the informal economy to some extent. The MSME sector was given lots and lots of soft loans, and to withstand the crisis. So India's approach can be summarized as follows. First thing that India wanted to do was to ensure that there was no mass hunger. Lots of people did not suffer from food deprivation and did not die of hunger. It would easily have been possible. It could easily have happened that lots and lots of people would have lost their jobs, lost their means of livelihood, unable to pay for food, and therefore there would have been mass starvation. Okay, so even if, for example, if you go back to the periods in India whereby we've had, say, some localized droughts also, sometime in the past, not now, but in the droughts in the 1950s and 1960s, not to speak of the colonial period, where large number of people were used to die from the droughts and the associated food scarcity, because the government would not step in. So the first thing that the government tried to do was to ensure that there was no mass hunger, and that they have done very well. They have assured minimum rations to about 800 million people, 80 crores, 800 million people, right from the time that the pandemic started. And I think that that is going to go on until Diwali this year. So this is a remarkable achievement. This is something which cannot be imagined anywhere in the world. To feed 800 million people for such a long period in order that they don't die from the pandemic, from the after effects of the pandemic. So that is one thing. So that they avoided one crisis that way. The second crisis that they avoid, the second crisis that could have easily occurred, is large-scale bankruptcies. Okay, so the shops are closed. People are not able to sell things. They depend on daily earnings from their shops and so on and so forth. So they are also denied usual everyday earnings. So it is possible that they might collapse. Their earnings might collapse and their enterprises might collapse. That the government tried to address through the policy of giving soft loans to the MSME sector. So a lot of financial support was given to the MSME sector. So the MSME sector was certainly much diminished in value and volume over this past period. And then the MSME sector, but nevertheless, the MSME sector did not collapse. So the first thing to do was avoid a famine-like situation, avoid a situation in which hundreds of thousands of people die of hunger, and avoid a huge bankruptcy. So once you have done all that, then the idea was, okay, if you remember, people have to be very look back at economic policy. Very important. If you remember, in the early part of the pandemic, there was a huge outcry from economists all over the world. India should give a big fiscal stimulus to the economy. You remember that? Big fiscal stimulus to the economy. The government should spend X% of GDP in trying to do that. Now, but please realize that this is not America, where supply chains are functioning very well. This is India, where daily contracts are made and everything is in the informal sector. If you just pour a lot of money into the economy without first repairing the supply chains, what is going to happen? There is going to be inflation, huge inflation. This is stagflation, as it is called. The economy would slow down and the prices would rise. So that would be adding insult to injury, as they say. That would have been terrible. So I think the government was very wise. It did provide a lot of stimulus, but the stimulus that was provided was targeted to increase supply. So if you have a demand stimulus without increasing supply, then you increase prices only. But if you have a demand stimulus that simultaneously increases supply, then that has the effect of increasing output and increasing growth. So yes, the first quarter of the pandemic was very bad. India's growth in that quarter came down by 23.1%. I remember it was the worst performance of any country, major country in that period. But then after that, people have realized that India has been vaccinating very fast. India has not imposed a national lockdown. There have been localized lockdowns and some major and some minor problems in individual states. But the prospects for economic activity remain good. So in the last quarter, the figures that just came out, there was a huge boom in economic output. You might have seen that compared to the first quarter, in which there had been a drop of 23.1%. In the last quarter, there was an increase of 20% in India's GDP compared to that not compared to the previous quarter. So the point is that the economy is I think on the mend. It is certainly. I don't expect the economy to be back at 2019 levels even in 2022. Even in 2022, we will be about 90 to 95% of 2019 levels. So we haven't yet reached 2019 levels, but the economy is in much better shape than before. On the other hand, what we have also done is that, there's a famous saying that a crisis should never be wasted. This is a famous saying of American politicians. So if we have a crisis, a major, you remember that in 1991, when we had the crisis after the Gulf War, and India was down to a few weeks of imports, foreign exchange, and the Big Bang reforms of Narasimha Rao took place. So there was a crisis then, and that crisis was exploited to push through the dismantling of the license quota Raj and to fixing the central government's budget. That's what this crisis was addressed to, and this crisis has also been used to make some very important structural changes. One of them is, of course, the Atmanirbhar Bharat. You can't imagine the number of PPEs. I think they produce. I don't know the exact figures, so I don't want to say it. But they produce lakhs and lakhs of PPEs every month, or at least every quarter. Each quarter now in India, and India is exporting PPEs. You might also remember that during the pandemic of the first phase of the pandemic, when the PPEs came from China to Italy and Germany and even India, many of them were defective, and they were returned to China. Italy returned a large bunch of PPEs from China because they were defective. So they would not guard the person who was using those PPEs for their personal protection. So this is another thing. The quality of output, whatever you are producing, has to be first rate. You just cannot dump it on other countries just because these countries don't have a choice. They are reliant on China, heavily reliant on China, and China can dump anything that it wants on them. That is not something which is good long-term economic policy. So this is what has happened in India. So my personal opinion is that the economy will continue to grow. The inflation picked up, as you can imagine. Just imagine what would have happened if there had been an unbridled explosion of demand without increasing supply. So inflation has increased as was expected, but it is under check. The financial markets are reasonably stable, despite the large scale collapse of credit and economic activity in the country. There have been no major bankruptcies in the country. Most of the banks are reasonably stable. The MSME sector is also doing quite well. What is important now is to ensure that the liquidity which has been pumped into the economy, into the banking sector, can be used by the MSME sector and other sectors for expansion of economic activity. So there are many challenges still left, but I think that the outlook is now quite sanguine, provided this nasty pandemic doesn't take a turn for the worse with some very strange variant.
You are right to a great extent, sir. You have very well summarized the hurdles faced by India and how they have been overcome. And we are at a level now that we feel a little satisfied that the future is bright if the efforts continue in the right direction. Besides this abnormal conditions, not only in India but also in the whole world, we would like to draw your attention to a problem, to an issue that haunts every now and then. That foreign investors are a little shy in India. So, what inhibits foreign investment in India, and how this situation can be overcome? What policy decisions or administrative decisions at different levels should be undertaken so that the foreign investment is there, the flow is regular, and the needs of Indian economy are fulfilled.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very important question. Let me give you a very the answer is quite elaborate, but I'll give you a very short answer to it. And the answer is that if you look at the proclamations of the government, you would see that they have been proclaiming that the country has risen a lot in the ease of doing business rankings. The World Bank puts out this ease of doing business rankings, and India has moved up a lot since 2014, since this government came to power. Why has that occurred? Now, if you go into the ease of doing business ranking of the World Bank, you will find that it has a number of categories. One of the categories is electricity supply. And India has done extremely well in electricity supply. You know that now almost every village in India has electricity supply, and there is in the days of erratic and unpredictable electricity supply are gone. And so that is a major factor why the ease of doing business index in India has gone up, and that is why the investment picked up. However, there are other items in that index which we have not addressed so far, and one of the principal ones is ease of doing contracts and ease of adjudicating contractual disputes. There has been a lot of talk recently in India about ancient laws governing our behavior. Ancient laws governing our behavior. So we have very old laws not meant for the 21st century, guiding how contracts would be written, how contracts would be contractual disputes would be adjudicated, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the factors, and there are others. Other reasons why. One of them is whether there is an integrated transport linkage. Okay, so whether goods can move seamlessly from ports to trains to planes to road, whatever, and into the country and vice versa. It is very good that the country has established the goods and services tax. That is a major achievement. But there are many indicators within the ease of doing business index where India is still lagging behind. And I'm afraid that unless the work on those indicators is speeded up, India's ease of doing business index will reach a plateau. It will not climb further. So we should be, I'm sure the government is aware of this, but it is very difficult, in India to push through these kinds of judicial and legal reforms. There have been many law commissions and so on and so forth in the country. They have not. The progress is slow. But nevertheless, I'm sure that efforts are being directed towards this, and hopefully we'll get good news. But right now, you are right. We are reaching a plateau in terms of foreign direct investment. It's still quite high, because there are so many opportunities in India. See, in India, there has been even from colonial times, there has been a fundamental disjuncture in India's view of itself and the an outsider's view of India. So the outsiders have always viewed India, even from colonial times, as a market. Whereas India would like to view itself not just as a market, but as a manufacturer, which can sell. A market can only last so long. Once the incomes are exhausted and the goods are bought, the markets will cease to be relevant to the manufacturer who may be sitting thousands of kilometers away. But if the country itself manufactures and produces and sells, not just for its own market, but for the rest of the world, then there is progress. So the climate for FDI in India should be improved. For example, there's the move to allow very large FDI in the defense sector and in the insurance sector are very welcome moves. But you please append to them legal reforms so that if there are contractual disputes, they can be cleared up very soon. And the capital of investors sitting far away from India is not tied up in difficult situations.
So yes, you have pointed out to many policies about foreign investment in India, and the government is now trying to take up all of them one by one. And of course, there have been disputes about contracts and all that. But now the government is serious, and they are taking steps to that such a incident don't occur in future. Dr. Jha, besides this foreign investment issue in India, in recent times, we have heard of another war. We have heard about military wars so far, but now these trade wars have also come up. And the trade war which concerns India is between US and China. Some people believe that this opens a window to India. Do you think that India can exploit the situation to its own advantage if the trade war between the two major powers continue?
Yeah, well, I think that the trade wars that have occurred. See, trade wars are a standard response to economic slowdown. Have been a standard response to economic slowdown. So when the Great Depression occurred in the 1930s, there was a big trade war, and that led to the perpetuation of the Great Depression. And even after the global financial crisis of 2008, 2009, there was a big temptation on the part of several countries to have a trade war. So what is a trade war? You impose tariffs on one country, on the country from which you are importing, and the other country then imposes a tariff in response on your products. So that's what a trade war is. Now, in the case of under the present circumstances and after the global financial crisis, people had the sense to avoid a full-fledged tariff war in the sense that I have just described, but they did indulge in a currency war. So each individual country tried to let their currency devalue in the market against other currencies. So that of course led to a problem. But now America has realized that it has lost its manufacturing base completely, almost completely. America used to be a major manufacturer of so many things. And ironically, America is one of the few countries with which India has a trade surplus, which is remarkable that India has a trade surplus. I at least had one till last time I checked, has a trade surplus with the United States. So America has basically lost its manufacturing base, and manufacturing has shifted lock, stock, and barrel to China. Almost all countries have this problem, and the rest of the big investors in America, they are global players. They will produce where the cost is cheapest and sell where the prices are the best. So in that kind of tussle, the United States lost out, and so now what can happen is, to the extent that it is possible, I don't know the exact parameters, they'll have to be investigated. America is trying to revive its manufacturing base. That is true. That is clear from the tariff wars that happened. Though the tariff wars have become a little bit more quiet after the 2020 elections, after Joe Biden took over as president. So what India can do is to assure America that it can provide goods. Again, going back to the first point, provide goods on a certainty basis, good quality goods, maintain a certainty of supply. So even intermediate goods, so that America can then produce the final goods. Now, the reason why that may be very attractive to America is that India will be a more, in America's view now, India will be a more reliable trade partner than China, which has had all these problems that we have been speaking about. And secondly, India's wage rates are much lower than China's. China has had many years of high economic growth. So wage rates there are much higher than India's now. And so therefore, in this kind of activity, where intermediate goods and so on and so forth, India would have a comparative advantage compared to China if it plays its cards well. Of course, there are other countries which are also very, very desperately trying to get into the American game. And these countries are Bangladesh, Philippines, and so on and so forth. They are also wanting to produce. But they are smaller countries. They don't have the economies of scale which India would have. So India has a good opportunity there. So if it plays its cards well, India can benefit from the reindustrialization of America.
So yes, I think India stands a good chance of exploiting the situation, and we can hope that it will be to India's advantage, and this tariff war and all that will work to its own advantage. Now, Dr. Jha, I would like to come to present economic conditions in India, particularly after post-2014. There has been almost a clarion call for economic revival. And a call was given in 2014, good days are coming, अच्छे दिन आने वाले हैं. And the mood in India was for a change in the economic conditions, and the whole country, I think, looked to it. So during these 6-7 years, how do you look at this situation? Has there really been an economic revival in different fields?
Well, let me put it this way. In 2012, 2013, do you remember the term policy paralysis? You must be remembering the term policy paralysis. That was being said in those days in many quarters. The government was simply not able to take decisions, and lots of problems had stockpiled. There were, large-scale allegations of
Corruption.
grand corruption and so on and so forth. This kind of thing was happening. Bloomberg had estimated, I remember, I wrote an article about it a long time ago. Bloomberg had estimated that almost 30% of India's economy was black economy. And that is something which is frightening. You know, what you don't know whether you are dealing with the legitimate economy or you're dealing with a with basically what is black money, laundered money, or some such thing. And that, of course, leads to a lot of nefarious activities like drugs and so on and so forth. Many evils are associated with it. So I'm one of the very few economists in the world, but my view has remained unchallenged. I've written about it publicly. Strongly defended the government on the policy of demonetization, because that really hurt. That was a momentous step. That really took the steam out of the black economy completely. Of course, it was a major upheaval for the ordinary people. And I was actually in Delhi when the demonetization was at its peak, and I, as a social scientist, I moved around and tried to observe how people were reacting to the demonetization. And it was very interesting that people were understanding it. And at least what I could see, they stayed in the queue for 2-3 hours to get their 2,000 rupees of regular notes and so on. And then they switched to, now you see, so many good things have happened as a result of demonetization. There has been such a large digitization of the Indian economy, right? So many people are now paying by card, by check, by interbank transfers, Paytm, and so on and so forth. Bhim app, so many things are doing very well. So India is moving towards being a modern financial economy, which was unthinkable before 2014. And GST. Everybody has lauded the implementation of the GST, but the GST would not have been successful. GST is quite successful. Even during the pandemic, it is raising more than 1 lakh crore rupees a month in revenue. Even during the pandemic, when economic activity is down. So the GST was not having successful had India continued with its large black economy. Okay, there are some very strong estimates from the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States, which says that internal trade liberalization in India, within India, to make sure that goods can be produced in Tamil Nadu and sold in Bihar or whatever, without any hitch, smooth passage of goods, so integration of the Indian market, which was possible through the GST, would not have been successful without the demonetization. So when the informal economy was, this is the paper by Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel laureate, a long time ago. If the informal economy is too large, then what happens is that in a tax like the GST has adverse effects, and by integrating the whole economy, you get a much bigger jump in human welfare compared to just trade liberalization with the rest of the world, in a case of a country like India. So I think both of these policy measures, demonetization and the goods and services tax, were really, I must say, I was very impressed. Though I would have liked to see the slightly different version of the GST, but I'm very happy with those kinds of things. And then you have this So that is on the efficiency side. And that is on the efficiency side. That is, you are getting an efficient tax system, and you are getting an efficient financial system. On the equity side, on the social services side, the fact that you were able to have this Aadhaar-based transfers to people, where in the old days, Rajiv Gandhi used to say that when 1 rupee is sent out of Delhi, 15 paise reaches the poor man. Now that doesn't happen. Okay, there is instant transfer. So there have been gains on the efficiency side, on the equity side as well. Okay, now in the first few years after 2014, there was a substantial rise in GDP growth. There is, if you go back to look at the figures for 2014, 2015, the growth figures were quite optimistic. 2016, quite good. 2016, with the demonetization, obviously growth fell for a while. And 17 and 18, again, growth improved. But then after that came the pandemic, which of course has hurt growth. So I think that now growth is not going to be, except for short periods, growth is not going to be in the vicinity of 9% or 10%, which we have sometimes seen in India. It will be more like 7%, even when when the pandemic is over and things are settled down. So between 7.5 to 7.5%. But the economy will be more efficient. Economy will be more efficient. It will be more diversified. There will be a better manufacturing sector. The poor people's needs would be taken care of. Farmers' needs would be taken care of. Not completely, of course, but to a greater extent than they were being taken care of earlier. So I think that on the whole, I would not say this is a spectacular achievement, but it has been a good performance so far.
Yes. I mean, everybody will agree that and one should be optimistic about future, and let's not go back to the years of depression and all that.
Right.
Dr. Jha, one issue that is engaging the attention of the whole country is about agriculture reforms, and
Yes.
sort of agitation by farmers has been going on for a very long time.
Right.
Because the government has enacted a few laws, and the government said that it is in the interest of the farmers and they will get MSP, and it is for the betterment of the farmers. So do you think that the call for agricultural reforms is likely to gain substantial success? And what are the misgivings about these three acts about agricultural reform? Because everybody has been talking about agricultural reform right from 47 after independence. Now, if there is something being done, laws are being enacted, so why should people not accept them? What is the hitch? What are the drawbacks they feel that should be removed through legislation and all?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question, and it is very big issue in India right now. I have done some work on this, quite a lot of work actually, on agricultural prices in India, and therefore I can claim some amount of experience in. Let me first begin at the tail end of the chain, right from if you begin from the farmer side. The farmer side, everybody in India knows that India is having a peasant, family-based, household-based peasant agricultural system, whereby farmers cultivate mostly for themselves, and then they don't don't produce much for the market. These are small farmers. And the important point is that the size of the farm holdings are continuously going down. Okay, the farmers hold 1 acre or half an acre, so on and so forth. I think the mean size of land holdings of the farmers is less than two hectares. So it's very small farms, and they are going smaller and smaller because the same plot of land is being divided one generation after another. So if you look at the empirical literature, and one point to mention right here is that in terms not of output per unit labor, but output per unit land, output per unit acre, output per unit hectare or whatever, India is not doing very well. India has lower output per acre than many developing countries. Why is that? Well, the reason for that is that these small farms are not efficient. They're very inefficient. They suffice for the need of the household that is operating, but not all the time. But they are not very efficient. And since they are not efficient, what you have is, of course, you have a situation in which a lot of food is being grown, and every year we proclaim that we have such a massive harvest of wheat or rice or jowar or whatever. But the point is that if agricultural card was played well, not only would India have very large harvests for its own consumption, but it will also become a major player in international food market. The world is, Josh was mentioning some of my work in world hunger. The world is now facing a real problem of food availability in the medium term, 5 to 10 years, 15 years, something like that. Why is that? The first thing is that, many major river valleys are being taken over for urbanization, particularly in Africa. Those are the lands, so the major river valleys which are very fertile, which grow a lot of food, they are being taken over for urbanization. It happened in India also. You see all these settlements on the banks of rivers and so on and so forth. So there's going to be a food shortage in the medium term. And so that's one reason why there is a food shortage. The second reason is, of course, climate change. Climate change is going to lower agricultural productivity in the zone of the world between the tropic and semi-tropical ranges of the world, where most of the world's population lives. So there's going to be a drop in food available per capita. I've called it a neo-Malthusian scenario for the world economy. So there's a potential for India, if it really improves its efficiency, because it has such low efficiency right now. It has a lot of catch up to do. So if it improves its efficiency and looks forward and improves its efficiency, then it has the potential to be a really major player in the agricultural economy of the world. And what these policies are trying to do is to basically move the agricultural economy slowly towards that. Okay, so it is a major opportunity which is there for us to seize if we can. We were talking about seizing the opportunity to become America's major trading partner and so on a few minutes ago. So similarly, India can be a major supplier of food to Africa. You might know that some Indian some Indian industrialists are buying land in Ethiopia. You might know that, and other countries of Africa in order to produce food, because they know, they are anticipating that food will be in great demand in the future, in 5, 10, 15 years. So these laws help to do that. How do they help to do that? First, they provide a good incentive to farmers because they will give them the minimum support price, which they have always got. And there is something written that the minimum support price is going to be 50% higher than the cost of production. That has also been assured, and it will keep going up. What is being taken out of the picture? Intermediaries who used to buy from the farmers and then sell it in the mandis. So it is not a farmer's agitation. It is a middleman's agitation. There are the intermediaries' agitation. Farmers are going to benefit from this. So you will see that despite almost 8, 9 months of this agitation going on, it has a committed group of followers who probably have their links with the intermediate community. But major farming operations farmers in most parts of the country are not interested in this kind of thing. The second thing is that the government has done great things to commercialize agriculture. So it is providing them with avenues to increase not just agricultural output, but with agricultural income. Okay, so for horticulture and for example, generation of solar power through solar solar cells and so on and so forth. So it's going to farmers' incomes rather than farmers' production alone is going to be increased. And the law which says that the farmers can negotiate with a commercial firm to farm for them, that is a very good law, because it allows the farmers to get a better price than they would have got from the MSP, only if they want to. Nobody is going to force them to sell to this. We are a democracy. Even the smallest amount of problems with farmers, the whole civil society and press will be up in arms. So nothing like that can go on in India. And finally, I would like to come to the other end of this. So I came to the producer end, then the middleman, and now we come to the other end, the consumer end. You would remember, Professor Gaur, that there used to be a time in India when local droughts used to cause a lot of hardship. There was this famous case in Western Orissa. Orissa used to be particularly Odisha, as it is called now, used to be particularly susceptible to this. So there used to be a drought, and what they do? The laws which were existing at that time used to prevent the drought would raise the price in markets in Odisha, but the farmers in Punjab or Haryana or Madhya Pradesh could not sell in Odisha because of the laws that existed then. And those laws have now been scrapped. Now, I have done formal testing, econometric testing of this proposition in a paper of mine published in 2005, where I have shown that the markets within a state are more integrated than markets across states. So if something happens in one part of Madhya Pradesh, another market in Madhya Pradesh will pick up that signal, but another market in Punjab or Bihar or West Bengal will not pick up that signal. So that is why consumers lose out. They face local scarcities. So that part of the equation also needs to be considered. So, in my view, provided you trust the government, it's not, and if it goes against its word, it will be held to account. We all know that. Provided you trust the government, this is a good policy. It should be supported by all who want the interest of the country to prevail, rather than that of intermediaries or people in the mandis and so on. I've written extensively about this agitation. By the way.
Yes, yes. What you say is absolutely right. Actually, there has been a lot of misunderstanding about the intentions of the lawmakers, and political implications were raised and all that, and the economic factors were ignored. That it was for the betterment of the farmers. They will get better,
Sure.
for their
Sure.
product and all that. So that I think was overlooked, and the other factors overtook the economic factors. That was the first part of it. Dr. Jab, before we conclude, I don't feel like coming to an end this conversation with you. I wish I could listen to you for hours, and it was so interesting. Before we conclude this conversation, I would like to request you that the intern Sashwat Shukla, he is very much keen to raise a query with you, and he would like to ask you a question.
Yes, of course.
Sashwat, you can ask your question.
Yes, sir. So the query will take you slightly back behind in the discussion where we were talking about the US-China trade war and the space that India can create for itself in the global supply chain. What do you think, sir, would be the impact of India walking out of a big major free trade agreement like the RCEP? And with the India-USA FTA talks also breaking down, and India-UK FTA talks also going in a slightly negative direction currently. So what could be the impact, if any, on India's chances of entering the global supply chain at this point?
Yeah, I think that in my view, these free FTAs are a bit overrated. What matters is the MFN, most favored nation clause. How are you trading under the FMN, most favored nation clause? That is what is more important. Now, the RCEP. Now, let me say this very explicitly. The RCEP was always a RCEP would require India to have a lot of structural adjustment. For example, do you know that if with the RCEP, the Amul milk enterprises in Gujarat would basically be closed down? Is India prepared for something like that? Amul has been such a major achievement of India. Everybody. Professor Gore knows that, you know it, everybody knows that. It has been such a major achievement of India. I remember when I was a child, there was a lot of milk scarcity in India. And then now with Amul, there is a surplus of milk. India is perhaps the largest producer of milk in the world. Of course, it is behind protection, it's true, but it has had a lot of major good effects. It provided milk to the entire country. It has provided employment to so many farmers and particularly women. It has been a major benefactor to women who are producing this milk, and so many other things. So the kind of structural adjustment that India needs to have in order to join RCEP would have been really spectacular. And another important point would have been, of course, the dismantling of the support to farmers, because that is where most of the FTAs get stuck, right? Most of the FTAs get stuck on the issue. Even in the WTO, in the Doha round, India has had problems convincing other countries that they cannot dismantle the agricultural support that they give to farmers, like the MSP and so on. They cannot do that. If they do that, then of course there will be no government can withstand that shock, that political shock. It will be impossible. So basically, I think that why would India want to be in the RCEP? If you ask yourself that question, well, basically because of markets. Isn't India a large enough market? India is a large enough market. It would have become a large market for many of these countries. But India doesn't need by itself a very large market. India needs to produce for large markets, including itself, and it needs to ensure that its manufacturing and agriculture have ready access under the MFN, most favored nations treaties, rather than through individual FTAs. Individual FTAs, as you must know, have this problem of this that this rules of origin clause is there in most FTAs. So you are condemned to buying from your FTA partner, even if that partner is not the least cost supplier. See what I'm saying? So if you're buying something or the other, say a mobile chip or something like that for putting into your phone, you're committed to buying that from your FTA partner, but if it is available from some other country at half the cost, but you can't do that. So the only good FTA is many good trade economists have said this. Many good trade FTAs is any good FTA should have the provision that when it comes to a situation like this, where an alternate supplier will give you that commodity at a lower price, you should have the freedom to go there. The RCEP did not do that. The FTA with UK or US is not going to do that. So this is basically a scrambling for markets. So India should give up this phobia of trying to start. India has a huge market. Other people are trying to enter this market. India can do very well on its own and supply elsewhere. I'm not calling for self-reliance. I'm calling for judicious use of trade policy. That's what I'm calling.
So I think that satisfies Sarshwat. And before I conclude this session, I would like once again to express my gratitude to you for sparing time. And despite all these technical hiccups that we have been facing for such time, lastly, we have been able to hear you, to have the benefit of your mature views on various economic issues that confront the world and particularly India. And we hope to have this opportunity in future also. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.